Well, the New York Mets lost their series to the Colorado Rockies this weekend. Francisco Alvarez continues to look like one of the best catchers in all of baseball. The Mets have a superstar on their hand with Alvarez, and we're going to talk about him on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you don't find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, the Colorado Rockies have the Mets number this year. They lost both series to them. You don't expect that. But this one, I don't feel as bad about because while the Mets failed to win the last two games, I look at this series overall, and there's some things I really appreciate. I appreciate the fact that Pete Alonso continues to hit home runs all the time, that Francisco Lindor seems to be coming out of it, hit a few home runs, had one that probably could have gone out, could have had a 3 home run series, honestly. He looks really good. Starling Marte getting some hits. Francisco Alvarez batted in the 2-hole. Yes, it all happened at Coors Field, and that is also why the Mets lost this series, because it happened at Coors Field and things get wonky there. And there was 2 games where they gave up, double digits, and that's definitely not a recipe for success. But overall, I look at this Mets team that is back to 500, and moving forward, I just believe so much in what they have and what they can be, that I'm willing to give them a little bit of time here to fully realize that. So yes, we're going to go through the games right now. And, the last 2 weren't pretty. I'm happy I did a show on Friday. If you didn't check that out, I recorded a little bonus weekend edition because Max Scherzer was awesome. And now that we have kind of the hindsight of seeing what happened in these next 2 games, realize how awesome he really was to get that first career victory at Coors Field, because it's really tough to pitch there. And Justin Verlander, I didn't think he looked awful in this one. I mean, look, obviously he gave up 6 runs, but I didn't think his pitches looked bad. Like, I didn't watch Justin Verlander in this game and think, okay, that's a guy that doesn't have it, or that's a guy that's really going to be, trying to find it moving forward. It's, okay, that's a guy that's pitching at Coors Field, and a lot of the luck went against him, and the Rockies were able to do a lot of damage, but I don't think moving forward this is some knock on what Verlander's going to be. But put the Mets in a 6-run hole, and I credit this team for finding their way out of it and actually tying this game and even taking a brief lead. Pete Alonso with the home run. You had the big 6th inning where a lot of guys contributed, and it kind of shows the length of this lineup now when you have a Beatty in there, when you have, of course, Alvarez batting 9th. Luckily today on Sunday, they put him out to the 2-hole. But in that big 6th inning, you had Jeff McNeil lead things off with a knock. Pete Alonso got a hit as well. Brett Beatty doubles home McNeil, keeps 2 runners on base, both in scoring positions. Starling Marte, ground out, scores another. Mark Canha grounded out, and they did a force play. They got Beatty at the plate. He was dead to rights on that, going on contact. Mark Vientos got a hit. He was 2 for 4 in this game, I believe. So it was a good first game back in the starting lineup. Sunday, not as good to Vientos, but I hope he continues to stay in there. That hit, though, extended the inning and allowed Francisco Alvarez to continue to show the superstar that he is quickly becoming. And he hit a huge 3-run homer to tie the game. And this comes after he had a triple earlier and was so excited to show everyone in the dugout that he's got wheels that he took his hand off the bag and got tagged out. So it was a rookie mistake, as Gary Cohen said, and then he more than made up with it when he tied the game. And the Mets were able to scratch another cross in the 7th to take a lead. Starling Marte with the RBI hit, but Jeff Brigham gave up a couple. Drew Smith gave up a couple. And ultimately, the Mets lose 10-7. So, again, it's Coors Field baseball, but not a game where I look at it and say, oh, this is a big referendum on who the Mets are moving forward. It's just playing baseball at Coors. You get to the second game, third game of the series. Second game is my last podcast on Sunday. You know, Tyler McGill gives up a lead that the Mets spot him. So first he allows 2 in the third, right? Then the Mets have a big fourth inning. And you think, all right, they're going to find a way now to win this series. And you hope that McGill can hold it. In that inning, Pete Alonso leadoff double. Starlin Marte drew a walk. Tommy Pham doubled in 2. Pham had a big game. The more I watch Tommy Pham at times when he's at his best, the more you think, oh, he could function on this roster. It's just a matter of figuring out all the pieces and if they make sense. It's, at this point, there's some times where I think Tommy Pham looks better than Mark Canha. Then again, Mark Canha is a better defender and a guy who his track record I trust more. But there has been moments this year where Pham looked at the better player and he had a monster game on Sunday. Canha, speaking of, drew a walk. Eduardo Escobar drove in a run with a single. And then it was again Francisco Alvarez hitting a 3-run homer. And the Mets had a 6-2 lead that was short-lived because Tyler McGill gave up 4. We were all 4 charged to him. Let me actually check that, make sure. Yeah, he had 6 runs earned allowed against him. So McGill goes through 4, 10 hits allowed, 6 runs. Okay, again, a couple of them unearned, but still just bad stuff. Nogasek gives up 5. That's ultimately the ball game. The Mets did their damnedest to fight back. They get 1 in the 7th on a Lindor home run. They scratched 3 across in the 9th inning, get really close, and they emptied the bench in the 9th inning with McNeil and Beatty coming in, and McNeil came through, and Beatty ground out to drive in a run, but Eduardo Escobar, who was 2 for 5, or 2 for 4 going into that bat, but ended up 2 for 5 on the day, makes the last out, and the Mets just came up a tad short, but I love the fight of this club, of the resilience. And I think overall, compared to the last series against the Rockies, where the Mets just were in the middle of just a stretch where everything was, futility, and you just felt like this team was going nowhere. I thought they battled, and I thought overall, there's a lot more optimism now than the last time these two teams met, even though they lost both series. And moving forward, you got a series against the Phillies at home. And if you win that one and, kind of get some momentum on your side going into an eventual series, this is the 3rd series from now. That's a homestand Phillies, Blue Jays. And then you travel to Atlanta. Who knows? You have a great homestand, and then you win a series against the Braves, and this ball club will be in a completely different place, and whatever it is, 10 days from now, however long until that Braves series ends. So I like the direction the ball club's going, even if they are still hovering at that 500 mark. And a big reason why I like where they're going is because they got a damn superstar behind the plate. Francisco Alvarez looks awesome. I want to discuss his series and his season just a minute before we do. If you're looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugar and calories, then you need to try the best tasting protein bar ever. Of course, I'm talking about Built. You got to try these. What makes Built bars so good is that they come covered in 100% real chocolate and with unbelievable flavors. The churro, the peanut butter brownie, the cookies and cream. And while they taste like candy bars, they come with only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait to get a box, because for years I've been telling you to go to built.com. And while I still recommend that if you want the mix box, want to try a little bit of everything, or don't want to leave your house, want them shipped to your door, if you're listening right now and you want to try a Built Bar, you can just go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club. You could try some of their specialty flavors. When you head to Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built Bars. They got the 4-bar box of the cookies and cream, the double chocolate with coconut puffs. If you're close to a Sam's Club, run in, grab yourself a 13-bar box of their hit flavors, the brownie batter or the churro puff. You thank me later. Go to your local store and buy Built Bars today. The New York Mets play the Phillies at 7:10 Eastern Time on Tuesday night. Catch every pitch of the Mets' hometown broadcast on SiriusXM with the SXM app. Just search Mets. Now, Francisco Alvarez is on fire over his last 25-26 games. If you go to FanGraphs right now, so I'm recording at 10:30 at night here, and I can look at a custom date range. I look back to his first home run this year on April 23rd. All the way up until May 27th, because Fangraphs has not updated the stats for the 28th, where he just hit another home run today. Okay. Across that span, you have a 25-game sample of Francisco Alvarez for the New York Mets. He's hitting 316, 388 on base, 671 slugging percentage. Now, where does that slug rank among hitters in baseball? 6th. Okay. Behind Christopher Morel, who has 9 home runs in 16 games, Aaron Judge, Marcelo Zuna, Lourdes Gurriel Jr., Salvador Perez, and then you get to Alvarez at that 671. Weighted runs created plus. Okay, that's a stat that measures hitters based on a league average of 100. This is the best way to tell how effective a player is offensively. Alvarez with a 189 WRC plus is 89% better than your league average hitter, 6th best behind Yandy Diaz, Christopher Morel, Aaron Judge, Gurriel Jr., and Juan Soto, who's getting on base at a 473 clip during this same span. Okay. Alvarez has 7 home runs. He has 15 RBIs. He has been unbelievable. And then you take this a little bit further. You go to Fangraphs wins above replacement. Okay. With a 1.5 F4 across this now 25 game sample, he has been the 5th best player in baseball, tied with Bo Bichette, Luis Robert, and behind Freddie Freeman, Juan Soto, and Wander Franco. And as you look through all those names, none of those guys are catchers. If you go to catchers across this span, where Alvarez has been awesome, he's been the best catcher in baseball, just a slight bit better than Sean Murphy. He's graded out as above average on offense. Its offensive value is better than every catcher not named Salvador Perez. And that's based on the offensive WAR. And on WRC plus, he is the best catcher. He's also slugging better than everyone but Salvi. He's getting on base better than everybody but Will Smith and Elias Diaz, who we just saw with the Rockies. His average of 316 is 5th best. He's been remarkable. And, the home run power to get, now it was 7. You bumped that to 8. Not to mention, again, all of these stats are not including another home run. And home runs obviously really inflate your stats, particularly stats like WRC plus. He's been amazing. And you actually have another one here, weighted on base average, which measures a hitter's each outcome. It weights it. So a home run's weighted, obviously the greatest, triple, double, single, walk, all of it. It's all weighted, and that's the weighted on base average, another kind of overall encompassing metric that tells us how good a hitter is. At 445, best among all catchers, ahead of Salvador Perez. And again, defensively, way better than Salvador Perez. This guy is amazing. Okay, what he has done, it's insane. He is putting up the numbers that he did that made him, one of, if not, by some people, like I think Pipeline, had him as the top prospect in all of baseball. And I know, last year, Just Baseball, where I work, he was trending that way. Now, there were some things that kind of knocked him down the list. We had Brett Beatty ahead of them going into this year, but he was still, 15 or something like that. And the things that we saw that you'd be concerned with, which was obviously the stuff I was talking about on the show, getting attacked by high heat, in quick order, he has fixed that. The learning curve for Francisco Alvarez has just been so short. He's just found a way to get better and better and better and better and better and better to the point where you're not taking this starting job from him. He looks like the 2nd best hitter on this team right now outside of Pete Alonso. It is insane what he has done. And I don't expect it to continue like this. I'm sure there's going to be a valley somewhere in this season. It's not all going to be peaks. But when you get a peak this good from your catcher, who, by the way, continues to grade out above average defensively, you can really dream about the future of this ball club with this guy as the face. As the face. Because on top of everything else, he's got a great personality too. I just want to dive into that a little bit more in a minute here. I want to go through kind of the future with this guy because I'd sign him to an extension tomorrow. I would. I'd start building around him because I think star power, it's almost an understatement with Francisco Alvarez. So we're going to discuss that a little more in just a minute. But first, another word from our sponsors. Francisco Alvarez, he's everything that you thought he was going to be as a prospect. He's more because I don't think anybody, when he was a prospect, was projecting him to be an above average defensive catcher from jump. There was always kind of the thought that athletically he could get there, that, he had the arm talent and, he had the ability to be quick behind the plate. It was just a matter of being able to block pitches, being able to frame, all those nuances. But there's one thing that I've clearly seen from, what I saw of him in the minors, and then even more so now that he's on this stage. Man, this kid loves baseball. Okay. He is a baseball junkie who is probably spending more time than anyone, you know, answering all the questions you had about the defense by working as hard as possible at it. And pitchers are starting to love to throw to him. And I'm sure what helps appreciate throwing to him is knowing that when he steps in the box with 2 runners on and you're down by 3 because you put your team in the hole like Verlander did, Alvarez can hit a 3-run homer. The home run at Wrigley through the wind, remarkable. Some of the bombs that he hit against this Rockies team. Here's the thing that I was saying about Alvarez, when I had questions about him offensively. He's still a guy that could run into one. And what he got in this series is some hanging sliders. What he got against Marcus Stroman, a hanging slider. What does he not do? Miss hanging sliders. You put that ball in a tee for him, he is not going to miss it. And, I said, before Mark Vientos came up, that I thought he was the best home run hitter of all these prospects. And look, the minor league stats bear that out. And I think if he got consistent playing time, we might see it. But I don't know. Maybe Francisco Alvarez is just one of those guys that when the lights are on him and he's in the big stage, he's going to show up. And the way that he celebrates these home runs, or seeing him, being at an infield hit and, telling the first base coach, and here I am hitting my mic, but, he's chugging his arms and he's saying, look at the wheels. And you just see everyone is laughing. He's this goofball with his personality. Man, that stuff is infectious for a ball club. And I think playing him almost every day now has really brought life into this team. Like I said in the last segment, I would extend him. He just changed his agent. Bad Bunny is representing him. The new sports agency, I'm sure they would love to ink a contract. Man, this is the type of guy that you say, you know what? Let's lock him into a number. Obviously, you don't want to say, hey, let's give a 21-year-old catcher a 14-year deal. You're not going to be crazy. But you say, hey, you want, an 8-year option or 8-year contract with a couple of team options on it, and you put life-changing money in front of this kid right now, and you do the Braves model, and he could just say, wow, I could be, set with whatever the contract ends up being, a 8-year deal that'll pay him, whatever it is, 80 something million, and, a couple options for $25 million contract, whatever it is. I mean, the fact is you could sign this kid to a 10-year deal and he can still know that he can hit free agency at 32, or an 8-year deal with the options, right? So yeah, I'm telling you, he is so special. And if nothing else, if this season ends in disappointment, if the Mets never get it together and they miss the playoffs, or they make the playoffs and they're a wild card team again, they're one and done. And you have a lot of questions going into this offseason. One thing you're not questioning is the fact that you had to capture the future. What that also does for this ball club as we near the trade deadline is it does take Kevin Parada, top catching prospect you got. It does move it a little more to the forefront of your mind that, well, if you got to move one of your top prospects, who are you choosing? You're choosing Jet Williams, who has a chance to play up the middle for you, whether that's center field, second base, shortstop, but you got Lindor, but still. Who's type of athleticism that you don't really have much of in the system. Alex Ramirez, a center fielder. Ryan Mauricio's hitting 350 in AAA. Who could play on this team this year. Mark Vientos, who probably doesn't have the value to kind of swing a deal for a top tier piece if that's what you're trying to acquire at the deadline. Or you have a catching prospect who everyone said fell to you and he should have been drafted earlier last year, who has a great hit tool and, a guy that I think a lot of teams would want to have. Now you have that kind of option in the holster if you wanted to go to it. Or you never know, maybe that's one of these teams that'll have an incredible catching tandem. The one last thing I'll say about Francisco Alvarez is now you do have to wonder how you kind of shape this roster. And not Francisco Alvarez, with Omar Narvaez potentially being back, a little over a week from now. Is it June 6th? If I'm not mistaken. June 5th or June 6th. Regardless, early next week, he could come back, and he's in the process of rehab. Do you go to the 3-catcher look? And try to get Alvarez in the lineup as a DH a little bit? It's an option. It's an option the Mets would have to consider. The only thing I don't love about it is, what does that really do for... I think it's... If Narvaez hits, it becomes easier because you can say on games that Alvarez is catching, well, here's a left-handed bat to come off the bench. And to me, the ideal option at that point would probably be to DFA Vogelback, give that extra run at DH when Alvarez isn't DH into Vientos. You keep Pham on the roster for now because, look, Pham was stealing some bases. He had a great game today. He stole a couple bases in this series. We'll see what you have there. He, to me, looks like a piece. Pham looks like a piece that fits with the young core you have more than Vogelback does. And so the more and more I see it, the more I think about it, I could see as soon as next week a decision to DFA Daniel Vogelback, and who knows, maybe on waivers you can swing some type of a deal, and then go 3 catchers with Narvaez and hope that Narvaez hits a little bit. That might be the move. But we'll see about that one. I just love watching Alvarez play baseball. I think it's the biggest takeaway I have from this series and really this season at this point. So that's going to be all, though, for today's edition. Locked on Mets. Tomorrow's show for all you everydayers will be previewing the first series this season, Mets versus Phillies. I'll take the time to maybe do a little bit of a state of the NL East in that as well. So make sure you check out the show. Follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Also, if you want to listen to every pitch of the Mets hometown broadcast tomorrow at 7:10 Eastern time against the Phillies, you can use the Sirius XM app. That's SXM is the app. Just search Mets. And again, make sure you follow me on Twitter, Finkelstein Ryan, and follow the show, Locked On Mets.